Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another special episode of Herschel Talkers. I've got a great guest on the program, returning guest, Brooke Austin from the Film Guys. Guy's on YouTube channel. He's blowing up, actually over 5,000 subscribers and growing.
Mm-hmm.
So how are we doing today, Brooks?
I'm doing good, gentlemen. I'm glad to be back on here. I know this time, I think it was this time last year, we were talking and you guys had just kind of kicked off this podcast and I had just kind of kicked off my film study type of avenue of development. So things have changed just a little bit in the last, 12 months or so.
Yeah, I think the difference is you're more like a five-star podcaster, more like walk-on material to community college.
Hey, everyone's got to start somewhere. I started in the business actually doing podcast. I did a podcast called Let Me Say Something. And looking back on it, what a terrible name. And I didn't even spell it Let Me. I spelled it Lemme, Let Me. And I would try to, have buddies on and nobody was really committed to it. And I ended up just doing it by myself and then jumped over to an NFL mocks podcast where I was talking NFL draft, which is very seasonal content. Right. And now I don't even do podcasts. Like we do an NBR show. We do live streams. We do simulcast stuff like that. But I'll be honest with you, podcast life for me, as good as I am at, creating content, or at least I think I am, I flop at podcasts. I can never figure it out. I can never get downloads, never get any traction. So I always have respect for anybody that does them. That's why I'm always quick to say yes whenever anyone asks me to come on.
Yeah, I think it's really impressive. Like I was watching your YouTube show last night, that you can do I call it hot mic for like an hour and you're talking by yourself, which is impressive because a lot of people, that's why I like having Sean, you can parry off people and ask questions, but to sit there and you don't have any e's. It's like you're just talking, which is great. So
it's taken a lot of years of practice right there, my brother. That is like 3 years of putting that together, of figuring out how to go about creating a show, how to be entertaining for an hour straight, and like you said, do it by yourself. If you notice anything that I do on NBR, which is our hourly weekly show, now moved to Wednesday. Sometimes that schedule moves around, but you'll notice that I don't do any guests. I don't do any call-ins. I rarely will take Q&A at the end, but I'm already 55 minutes to an hour in at that point. So, it's something that I take pride in, the ability to do it, because it is, a gift, but it's something God gave me, man. I've been running my mouth my whole life. So turning the camera on and just, saying what comes to the brain has been very, very easy for me, my whole life. So I'm blessed in that aspect, but it's still, man, I'm blessed in the sense that the audience enjoys it, right? They're engaged with it. Because if you're just talking, nobody cares. But if you can hold an audience, that's the impressive part. And I've been lucky enough to do so far.
Exactly. Yeah, we're going to jump right into it. Georgia beatdown of annihilation, whatever we're going to call it, 62-0. I know it was against Vanderbilt, and everybody says that. But I guess some of the stats, I think I'll probably take some of these from what Brooks said, is 62 points. Vanderbilt only got 77 yards, which if you do that on air, flag football team, school of the blind, whatever you call them, that's still impressive. 4 first downs, and I believe we had 6 rushing touchdowns or more rushing touchdowns than they did first downs. So I just want to throw some of those out at you. And what do you think about it? I know it's Vanderbilt, but still it is an SEC team with a pulse,
Yeah, I said it last night, and I'm known kind of as a hot take guy. People think I'm very hot take-ish, but man, I was rewatching it last night doing film study. It's got to be the worst SEC football team I've seen. I mean, they are really, really, really bad. And it's not only that they don't have talent, right? They're bottom dwellers in terms of talent pool on their football team. So Clark Lee and, that staff and guys like Barton Simmons coming over from 24/7 Sports, handling their recruiting, director of scouting, recruiting, and development. They've got a long hill to climb. But it's not only, bad football players, or at least not a good roster. I shouldn't say bad football players, not a stout SEC roster at this point, and far from it, but they executed poorly as a team could possibly do to start that football game. In 2 back-to-back plays, right? You turn the ball over on a kickoff return after Georgia walked it down your throat. You turn it over on a kickoff. They score right immediately. And then you get the ball back, you throw a pick the very next play. So those types of things, false starts galore, bad punts, bad special teams till late in the football game for Vanderbilt. Those are things like you couldn't do if you wanted to keep the game within like 60 points. I didn't think this game was going to be within 35 points anyways, and Vegas didn't either, 35-point spread. But you do things like that to start the football game, you're going to be down 35-0 against the number 2 team in the country when you are at such a disadvantage in terms of talent. The box score is what it is. It makes for comical things. I think the actual game in and of itself showed even more dominance. If you just turn on the tape, there wasn't a single block made from Vanderbilt, and there wasn't hardly a play made on defense from Vanderbilt either. It was just a downright pummeling for 4 quarters. It was rough to watch. I didn't even know you can have a running clock in college football. That was something I learned Saturday watching that football game, that you can have a running clock. That was rather impressive for Georgia to run it up like that.
Exactly, for sure. And it was great seeing guys like Jalen Carter, who everybody's been waiting on, just ragged on people. That one just went through there and just slamming. And Jordan Davis, I think he only played 9 plays, which is crazy.
Jason, yeah, 9 snaps.
First quarter. So,
yeah, I think, we could talk about Jalen just for a minute. I think last year I saw a guy who was physically prepared to play in the SEC as a true freshman, which says enough about him, right? And that's why the NFL was already on his heels last year. They were paying attention to what 88 was doing as a freshman. Now they're really in love with him because of what he's done in terms of development. He's playing a lot faster, but the most important thing I see on tape is he's doing what we call disengaging. He is getting blockers off of him so quickly. And that's the development of an athlete that you see from year 1 to year 2, and especially year 2 to year 3. I think it's what made Azeez Ojulari go from a 3rd to 4th round draft pick to bordering on a 1st round draft pick last year. And now he's in the league and he's set the rookie sack record for the first 3 games of his career for the Giants. And it's like, if you go watch him, that's what he's doing on all 3 sacks. He's getting blocked, but he's shedding the block as quickly as possible. That's a skill set that you can't quite teach. It's a skill set that's got to be developed, and very special football players put it together, especially Jalen Carter, as early as he's been able to do it.
It seems like, Jalen Carter was kind of the big, defensive line prospect for that class. The year before him, I believe it was Travon Walker.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like Jalen Carter's doing a little bit, or he's done a better job as far as developing that skill set. Is that still something that Travon Walker's I don't necessarily want to say struggling with, but it's still developing, do you think? Or do you think it's more?
To me, it's like Trayvon's a really tough eval for me because I see the physical skill set. I mean, he's as physically impressive as any football player in college football. That's not an overstretch. 6'5", 300 pounds, was a good enough athlete as a true freshman to be covering kickoffs for that 2019 football team for Georgia. So as physically as impressive as it can humanly possibly be. But when you look at him, right, and you look at what he's done through 3 years now, 2.5 years going on 3, well, his first 2 years, he just didn't play. Okay. There are very few positions on Georgia's defense where if it's a tight football game, the starter just doesn't come out. The defensive end position is one of those. So for the first 2 years of Trayvon Walker's career, Malik Herring manned that role. He was on the field almost every snap. He played about 85% of snaps in heavily contested football games. Blowouts are a different discussion. But when the games were tight, Malik Herring didn't come off the field, nor did Adam Anderson. Nor did Azeez Ojulari. So you got 2 examples of guys like Nolan Smith and Trayvon Walker who are just now getting onto the field for a predominant, number of snaps in a football game. And I think you're starting to see what they were, highly touted for coming out of high school. Whereas Jalen Carter played 30 snaps his second game of his college career against Auburn. So that's a guy as a true freshman where he was getting the opportunity to learn the skill set in live, facing live bullets. Whereas Trayvon Walker's had to kind of sit for 2 years. And he's a player that I watch on tape and I'm like, okay, 2nd, 3rd quarter, he's really starting to heat up, right? He's really starting to develop pass moves. He's really starting to figure out the timing and the spacing. It's a lot like playing defensive line. It's a lot like boxing. You got to find that window. You got to find that space, that range, right, of the offensive lineman that you're facing across from you. It's taking Trayvon Walker a couple of, series now, whereas last year was taking him a couple quarters. So I'm seeing development from 44 as well. It's just not showing up in the box score. But you know what? It never showed up for the box score for Malik Herring either. And had he not torn his ACL in the Senior Bowl, I think you're looking at a 3rd or 4th round draft pick from him too. And he has nowhere near the physical ceiling that Trayvon Walker does.
Wow.
I wanted to ask, I know this is an elite Georgia team, 4 games, number 1, I believe, in total offense. And then also, I believe it's 7th against the run. But Sean and I were debating the other day, except for maybe Roquan, is overall light years ahead of that 2017. Sean was like, yeah, Roquan will be starting, but comparing 2017 to this year's team.
You know, I get a lot of that, right? I get a lot of this is the best defense I've seen since 2017. And I think that's why, because everyone knows how good Roquan Smith was, right? Everyone knows how good Lorenzo Carter was. Like y'all see that. It flashes. But statistically, the 2019 team was better than the 2017 team. The 2019 team going into the LSU matchup was allowing 10.8 points per game, the fewest since 1981, folks. Like they were dominating, folks. Now, they got lit up against LSU. The team finishes 10-2. So you look at it on paper and you're like, well, 2019 wasn't that good of a season for Georgia. Wrong. That was the second best defense you'd had in 40 years in 2019. So when you're measuring football teams, when you're measuring defenses, I'd look at that 2019 team and I'd compare them with this year. And right now, they just got more dudes. They're just deeper, right? They're across the board just a little bit better, except for one position, they're getting better and better and better as those young guys and inexperienced guys like Keely Ringo and Amir Speed get some more reps. But that's literally the only question when we're talking about a defense that rotates 30 guys. They play like 10 or 11 defensive linemen. They play 4 different linebackers. I mean, they rotate it, folks, and they're really, really dominant across the board. So I would compare this team to that 2019 defense, which, again, was borderline historic for the University of Georgia.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a great point. I didn't think of it that way, but I know that was definitely a dominating defense as well. Looking ahead to the big matchup, I know, that was a beatdown of Vanderbilt, but looking at it, big game in game day. It's going to be 12 o'clock noon game. Number 8 against number 2. First off, what was your thoughts on? I know everybody's been kind of complaining on the noon game being picked. Do you think that was maybe like a botch by ESPN or?
I think it was, and there's been some reporting on this. I can't quite remember exactly what it was, but this was basically the SEC's opportunity to, get an ESPN game because they didn't get selected for the CBS game. They took Ole Miss, and they really wanted to compete with the Big Ten at their noon kickoff. I can't remember who kicks off at noon this week for the Big Ten. I mean, we could say what it is. I mean, it's a bad decision, whatever. But I mean, College Game Day is going to be in town. Kirk Herbstreit and Reese Davis going to be on the call. Noon kicks, they're not fun. Don't get me wrong. I don't like them. But it is what it is. You got to go out and play. And I think this is a good opportunity for Georgia, especially with the amount of top end recruits that they've got in town this week. I think it honestly kind of plays into favor for them because if Georgia's fan base shows up 93,000 strong and is just absolutely belligerently loud for a noon kick, that's a great impression. B, you win the game, assuming you win the game. And then C, you get all those recruits to stick around on campus inside the facility for after the game. Whereas Kirby talked about it in his press conference this week, whereas, let's say an 8 o'clock kick, right? Well, those guys are immediately getting on the plane and immediately getting on the bus and going home, like after the game. You don't really get a time to chop it up with recruits there. You get a little time pregame, but pregame, you're trying to focus on the game in and of itself. Whereas this is an opportunity for you guys to go handle your business. And then 4 o'clock, you're sitting down with a Nye White. You're sitting down with Shamar Stewart. You're sitting down with some of these recruits that are going to be in town. Justin Benton, some of these top end recruits that are slipping my name right. Barry Alexander, Deion Smoke Bowie, guys that have decommitted from your program. They're headed elsewhere right now. Yeah, and I Williams, like all of them. Wilson, Marcus Wilson, Wilson from Kamari Wilson from IMG Academy. You get an opportunity to sit down with these kids after a big time game, a college game day environment, and all that good stuff on campus. So recruiting wise, I think this almost plays into favor for Georgia because you got a lot of opportunities to prove that, like, hey, look, noon kick. I don't care who's playing. Our fans are going to be loud. They're going to be obnoxious. And not only that, we're going to go out and win and dominate a football game. And then you guys are going to get to hang out with us on the facilities, hang out with the players in the locker room, do all that good stuff after a big win. So I think it kind of plays into favor, honestly. Sucks for the fan base, but it is what it is.
Exactly. That's some very good points. We're going to be there. It's going to be a noon kick. Sean and I did find some tickets, so we'll be lower level, which is great. But I guess another positive look at is looking at the matchup. So Arkansas, from what I read, I think this is the third time they get on the plane and fly in, and also could be a noon kick. Mm-hmm. And I know Jefferson maybe had a brace this week. Their QB maybe a little banged up. They are 8th in the nation in rushing, and we're number 7. So I just feel like looking at X's and O's, that kind of plays in our hand. And I think it's going to be, a battle in the trenches. What's your thoughts?
So I just spent about an hour watching them against Missouri last year. KJ Jefferson's only start from the year. And I'll spend about another 2 hours before I get on air watching all this tape. I think the most important thing that stands out to me is that everybody wants to talk about them being a physical football team, right? They punch you in the mouth. I think that's you read the box score. This football team's very, very misdirection heavy. I mean, there's a lot of pre-snap motion. They do a lot of funky stuff post-snap. Pulling backside guards and tackles while running towards the backside guard and tackle while they're pulling, heavy action with the run game and the quarterback. Do a bunch in the screen game. Run some trick plays. You're almost guaranteed to see some type of trick play from this offense. Kendall Briles is kind of known for that at this point on tape. So yeah, they are a physical football team in the terms that they're big and they run the ball, but they got a lot of eye candy. So if you think you're just going to line up and just come downhill and punch them in the mouth, they're going to end up outside, with a pitch, run a quarterback option away from you and be on your edge really, really quickly. So I think most importantly for Georgia, because I don't worry about them getting pushed around at the line of scrimmage. That's not something that Kirby Smart defenses ever do, especially not with Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Devontae Wyatt, man in that interior of that defensive line. So I don't worry about them being able to control the line of scrimmage. What I worry about is guys like this. To me, is the biggest test for Quay Walker. I watched for years Quay Walker just misread things where he's late to a key. He's just late to a reverse. He's late here. And then the next 4 plays, he looks like one of the best linebackers in the country. This game is so important for him personally to make sure his eyes are right at all times. It's something Kirby Smart preaches. Keep your eyes right, right? Something that the corners are going to have to figure out too, because there's a lot of wheels. There's a lot of fake bubbles, verticals. I mean, there's slip screens. There's things that they're doing outside and inside that is just there to confuse you, have you looking in the wrong place while they're trying to sneak an explosive right behind you on the other hand, right? Look over here, look at my right hand, and smacking you in the face with their left hand. That's what they do offensively. So, yeah, again, big physical team, run the ball a lot, all that good stuff, but it's all eye candy. It's all misdirection and trickeration. So keep your eyes right, get downhill, and pursue the football, especially when we're talking about KJ Jefferson. That is a rally to the football quarterback. That is not a guy that you can just hit once and think is going to go down. He will break a couple tackles. This is a big-time pursuit game and a big-time eye discipline football game for Georgia.
Hey, one question I had, or I think me and Trey have talked about this, is to me it looks like, if you're going to have one criticism of Georgia's offense potentially, to me maybe it's been on the offensive line, and namely like the right guard.
he's been very
So here's my thing about Warren Erickson. I think Warren Erickson's a great football player, good football player. I think he's an above average center. Man, I think when you slide him to guard, his physical limitations in terms of athleticism, right? His ability to go east and west, they're really, really exposed. I mean, they're really exposed at the guard position, whereas at center, you get a lot of help, right? Most of the time you are the help man, honestly, at the center position, unless you got a true zero over the top of you, right? A true nose tackle standing right over the top of you. But at guard, there's no opportunity for that. At guard, especially in pass protection, I see teams hunting this dude. I mean, it's like they see the big buck on the opening of deer season. And I don't even hunt, but I'm telling you, that's what it looks like to me. I mean, it took Clemson about 2 series to say, all right, well, hell, let's get them to determine their slide. Let's get the center working left, and then let's just feast on number 50, because he can't handle double moves. He can't handle one-on-one island type pass protections. And in the run game, he's not terrible. I'm not going to, like, even at the guard position, he's really good at center. He's not bad at guard. My concerns are him getting turnstiled at right guard, because it's happened multiple times. The sack they gave up against Clemson, that's on number 50. The sack they gave up against South Carolina, that's on number 50. Okay, so the multiple sacks that they've given up this year, it's been because teams are hunting number 50. And if he can't figure that outside to sidewise, that's why you're seeing them experiment so much with left tackle. That's why you saw what you saw against Vanderbilt. They know it. They watched the film. Okay, so they identified that, hey, 50 is a problem right now. He's playing well in the run game, but we cannot have timely sacks. We can't have 3rd and 8. Arkansas just scored. We're only up 3 points. We've got to score right now in the middle of the 3rd quarter to kill all momentum. And then boom, we give up a sack on 3rd and 6, 3rd and 8, because they've now unleashed the one blitz that they've been saving, because they know it's a home run blitz, because they know they're going to get 50 in an isolated situation. You can't have that happen, which is why you've seen them do as much as they have in terms of experimentation on that offensive line.
So do you think like Broderick Jones is maybe ready? And then Sean keeps mentioning, is it Willock, Devin Willock?
Devin Willock.
He's a big body.
Yeah, so I worry about giving any freshman or redshirt freshman their first career start in a football game like this, especially with what they do. They are just like they're a misdirection football team on offense. Now I'll watch this defense a lot more tomorrow, but I know they're an odd front defense. And as an offense lineman in my years past, nothing, and I mean nothing, is more confusing than an odd front defense, a true odd front defense, not what Georgia quote unquote runs and calls themselves. Guys, they're an even front defense. Watch them. They got 4 down on almost every single play. Arkansas, on the other hand, that's a true odd front defense. They got a 0 and they got 2 5s. And it is very, very hard for young offensive linemen when you got linebackers plugging and blitzing into gaps and you don't know where you're going and you can't quite stay on your path and stay on your track because this guy's flying across your face and that guy's slanting backside. And then all of a sudden you're just turned around looking at the ball carrier and it's a TFL. So my thing would have been, like, yeah, I get Willock's going to be a good football player. He's going to be a really good football player for Georgia. Heard nothing but great things. I would be very, very worried about letting him be what we call the bubble player, where you just stick him out there left guard. He's got nobody in front of him, and now he's got to process information. He's got to process what's going on in front of him. I know he's going to get to practice that all week, but guess what? Arkansas has been saving some stunts and some blitzes for this football game. I promise you that. So experience is invaluable against an odd front defense. So I think you see them start the way that they've been starting. I think you see Jamari Sawyer left tackle, and Justin Schaefer left guard, Cedric Van Pran, Warren Erickson, and Warren McClendon. And then as the game goes on, if they feel comfortable, maybe they slide Broderick Jones out there, or maybe they just start him. But if you were going to start Broderick Jones for this game, if that was the game plan, I would have liked to seen you just throw him out there all the way dating back to UAB and let him take his lumps. Like, let him figure it out. Let him get live action. They didn't do that. So maybe the game plan wasn't to get him into this game. And if it is, then it is. And he'll go out there and he'll look dominant in pass protection, and he'll have a couple snaps where he's turning around looking at the ball carrier, get smacked for a -3. So that's what you got to do. You got to accept that if you're going to play young offensive line.
And speaking of Broderick Jones, when you've looked at him at film, is there one area that he seems like he's progressed at a little bit better than another as far as run versus pass protection?
I mean, he's always been an elite pass blocker. The one area of Broderick's game that has got to, and I mean got to get better, he's just got to be more consistent with physicality. I don't see a guy that's out there fist fighting. He's kind of just grabbing and holding on. Now, he's great at it because he's got great feet. He's an elite athlete, but if there's one aspect of his game, both in the run and the pass, the dude's just got to get more physical. He's got to start playing big boy SEC football, and that means trying to physically harm the person in front of you. I don't see that yet. And until that happens, you're still going to have plays where it's kind of up and down. And I think that's something that Kirby's talked about this week, just getting more consistency out of 59. There's too many ups and downs. And a lot of that is, just kind of taking that foot out of the gas, right? He's just not always on fire in terms of, his physicality. And that's something that comes with age, and also comes with comfort. He's just got to do a better job of knowing where he's going, and knowing where he's supposed to be. And that allows you to play fast. If you're thinking, you're done. You are absolutely cooked, and it's going to make you play a lot slower. So in terms of areas of improvement, physicality, and just playing faster, which again comes with knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, I think the one guy on our offensive line, I think, has probably been a little bit, to the extent you could say so, underrated, just because of all the 5 stars and the hype surrounding guys like, Broderick Young or Mims, and then Jamari Sawyer is McClendon.
Oh my God. I love me some more McClendon.
Yeah, right.
I love me some more McClendon. He's so, you talking about consistency. That guy's as consistent as the sun coming up tomorrow morning. I mean, he is flat out in the right place at the right time at all times. Hand placement, hat placement, foot placement. He is perfect. He is a technician out there. I thought there was some things that he could do better last year as a redshirt freshman in terms of the run game, but that's just a young buck being a young buck. Now here we are, redshirt sophomore. I think Warren McClendon is the type of guy that's going to get drafted. He doesn't have all these elite physical attributes, right? When you talk about Broderick Jones, you talk about Amarius Mims, those guys are freaks of nature, right? God gave them something that they just didn't give Warren McClendon in terms of general athleticism. Well, Warren's just so daggum clean in everything that he does. I see him being like a 3rd-round draft pick, and you're going to look up a decade from now, and you're like, hold on, wait a minute. Warren McClendon's made $100 million playing football, and he's been in the league for 10 years, and he's just been playing right tackle, and he never has any type of interviews, and no one ever talks about him. But here he is, and he's been a starter for, an NFL playoff team for a decade now. Who would have thought this was going to happen? Anybody that watched him at Georgia. I mean, if you just pay attention to him, he's just clean, man. Never messes up.
Yeah, great guy. I've heard one of the theories being that the reason why they haven't, tried somebody else out at left tackle is that the gap between Sawyer at left tackle versus guard is pretty sizable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you've seen any of Sawyer's film from when he was a guard. But if you have, could you kind of shed light on what you see as, or I guess really just kind of compare and contrast his film as a guard, strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, it looked kind of rough against Cincinnati a year ago. But again, man, that's an odd front defense, right? That's what we're talking about here with Arkansas. That's an odd front defense from Cincinnati where the guard's uncovered and they are slanting, crossing, blitzing, all left and right over that guard. And if you're just not comfortable, which he didn't look comfortable at all, I saw him laid off the ball multiple times last year against Cincinnati. And he just got turned around a lot because his eyes weren't in the right place. He was just a little bit confused. He was thinking too much. This is a redshirt junior at that point, right? A redshirt sophomore at that point. Actually, a true junior. He's a senior now. So true junior last year. And he just had some confusing plays, some head scratchers, if you will, against Cincinnati. I'll tell you what, I think his best game I've ever seen him play, guard or tackle, doesn't matter, was Clemson. He played a flawless football game against Clemson. I think it was his best playing of his career. And the tape shows it. He just didn't get beat all night long, was in the right place, does a great job in space as well. So he's playing at an elite level right now at tackle. And maybe it's a catch of he's not as good at guard, but he's better than any tackle we have right now. So those two answers, right? Those two results lead you to believe that you should probably just leave him out there, right? You don't have a young tackle that's absolutely stepping up and taking it over, right? Based off any type of game film or anything we've heard out of practice. So you don't have a young tackle stepping up. And Jamari, and Kirby said this himself in a press conference, last week, I believe it was, Jamari's just not practicing very well at guard right now. And I don't know why that is, but it's hard to go from, hey, I'm out on the edge, I got nobody really to help me. Now I'm inside. Now I got to deal with combination blocks, and I got to worry about slanting defensive tackles. And now I got to have my hand down. There's just a lot of change going on. And he obviously didn't, from what I saw, didn't respond to the change last year with 2 weeks or 3 weeks, almost 4 weeks worth of practice time between their last game and now we're playing Cincinnati. He had all that time to practice at guard and still looked a little bit overwhelmed. So this is a guy who's worked his butt off to become a tackle, being right tackle last year, now flipping over to left tackle. And I think he's kind of gotten comfortable there, but don't get it twisted. His future in the NFL, if he becomes a long-standing NFL player, which I think he will, it's at guard. So he's going to have to get comfortable with it no matter what.
Where would you project him at in the draft?
Yeah, it's really tough right now. It's really early. And I'm not as much of an expert in terms of draft coverage anymore because I just don't have time to watch all the offensive linemen. But I think right now you're looking at 3rd, 4th round draft pick. Just because there are, especially at tackle, there are physical limitations, right? he doesn't look like some of the guards that you see in the NFL. Doesn't look like Quentin Nelson. He doesn't look like Zach Martin, right? He's a little thicker. The body's got to tighten up just a little bit, but he's as good of an athlete as any of those players. He just doesn't have the pedigree right now or the game film, let alone to just say, yeah, this is a first round guard prospect. He's not. And he's not a first round tackle prospect either, because he lacks the length and the overall athleticism to be playing tackle on the NFL level. So it's a really, really tough evaluation, but you have to look at it and say, hey, this dude survived. He more than survived. He thrived in the SEC as a tackle, and we're going to try to bump him in. So, yeah, I think you're looking at a top 75 player, top 90 player, which, I mean, those are millions of dollars, gentlemen. So I don't think he's going to be hurt.
Exactly.
Okay. And then one other thing I wanted to talk about as well is, the addition of Coach Adai.
Mm-hmm.
To me, and I don't know, I know we've got a lot of transition from last year's defense to this year's defense, but and again, I've got an untrained eye. To me, it seems like the defensive backs have gotten noticeably better with his addition. I know Amir Speed's kind of gotten picked on a couple of times, but kind of when I watch them, I mean, it just seems like even the young guys, like they always just seem prepared and ready for games. Do you think that's probably a fair assessment, or what am I missing?
Sorry, I just got a text message. Always got to check my phone. Never know who's texting me.
It could be Pit Boss offering you that job, or the Lane Train.
Hey, I'm gonna tell you what. If Sam Pittman offers a guy a job in the Georgia media space, it ain't gonna be me. I'm just gonna say that right now. No, but in terms of Adai, here's what I'll tell you. A source told me during the offseason that Jamal Adai had and it is Jamal, by the way. Jamal Adai has the toughest job in America in terms of defensive backs coaches. And here's why. Your head coach, Kirby Smart, is commonly known and commonly referred to as one of the best, if not the best, defensive backs coaches and developers in college football. Okay, point blank. He's been an NFL DB's coach. Okay, this guy knows his stuff. That's your boss. And guess who else is in the room? Somebody that's probably considered a top 5 DB coach as well, in Will Muschamp. And here you are, a young 35-year-old defensive backs coach in that room. So not only are you getting coached hard and graded hard by your head coach, but you're now special teams coordinator who was a defensive analyst is watching you like a hawk. I mean, he's over there all the time because special teams don't practice while individual periods going on. So guess who's standing over there helping out during DB drills? Will Muschamp. And guess who don't have any, reservations about giving his opinion? Will Muschamp. So I'll tell you this. Here's how I know a coach is doing his job and a coach is good at what he's doing. It's week in and week out development, right? It's a change between week 1 performance and week 2. You see him week 1, Keely Ringo is holding guys. He looks completely lost. Can't find the ball, just kind of struggling. Week 2 against UAB, got a little bit better. South Carolina got much, much better. And then last week, he was locked down. I mean, his eyes were in the right place. He was jumping routes. He was playing confident. And granted, Clemson's a lot tougher than Vanderbilt. But over a 4-week span, I saw a guy who, as a true freshman or a redshirt freshman, might as well be a true freshman because he hardly practiced last year because he had shoulder surgery. I see a guy that went from, oh man, he's a liability. They're hunting him. They're literally in the red zone throwing the ball at him because they know he'll hold and get a pass interference and we get free 15 yards. To by week 4, I mean, he's in lockstep with everything that they're throwing at him from Vanderbilt. So that's, to me, the sign of a good football coach. And I could say the same thing about Matt Luke a year ago, where he's taking over an offensive line that never pulled. I mean, never. They never ran screens. They never did none of that crap under James Coley and Chaney. They never did. Never did counter. Never did power. They were a line-up, punch you in the mouth, inside zone, split zone football team. Well, and then you look up into 2020, they're starting to run counter, and now they got to run into the flats and block some corners on tunnel screens and things like that. And it's like, Coach, we ain't never done this before. And he's like, oh, it's okay, guys. We got time to develop, and week in and week out and week in and week out. I saw a football team was getting better up front. That's a good sign of coaching. That's how you know a guy's good at what he's doing.
So you think Matt Luke's definitely getting or has done a great job?
Yeah, I wouldn't say great job. I would say he's doing a good enough job. There is no reason that Georgia fans should be sitting there going, well, or we need to find something else. We need to find something else. He's just not doing his job. Well, I mean, we can't get 4th and 1 against Vanderbilt. We had 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 got shut down. We can't run the ball. I think that stuff's a little bit overblown. I see a guy that is recruiting really well. I see a guy that, these still aren't his football players. They're not, right? I mean, Jamari Sawyer, that's a Sam Pittman guy. Justin Schaefer, that's a Sam Pittman guy. Warren Erickson, that's a Sam Pittman kid. Warren McClendon, Sam Pittman kid. He hasn't recruited any of these players, okay? And guess what? All those guys, they love Sam Pittman. They loved playing for Sam Pittman. They love being coached by Sam Pittman. So he still doesn't have his organizational culture within his own room yet. So we got to wait a little bit before we say, oh, well, what are we doing? Like, why is there no development? Like I said, I see week in, week out development. Guys, if you turn on the tape against Arkansas last year, there were so many blow-throughs. There were people just going the wrong way. It was awful. I mean, it was terrible in terms of offensive line production and execution, let alone, production. And then week 2 against Auburn, they run the ball down Auburn's daggum throat. I mean, they took it baseline, said, hey, we're just going to go back to what you guys know. We're going to play inside zone. That's what we're going to do. We're going to run inside zone. We're going to split zone. I think they ran for like 280 yards against Auburn that night. So, yeah, I see things on tape, and the things that I hear, look, Kirby Smart is happy with what's going on with his offensive line unit right now. They're pass protecting really damn well. They're just figuring some things out in the run game right now. You got to let them have time to do it. And you can't be running off. And here's the other thing I'll say. You let Matt Luke go, there's going to be about 80 colleges lining up to try to hire Matt Luke, first of all. So that's how you know you got the right guy. You shouldn't get rid of him. But B, who the heck you going to go get?
We're going to go get Brooks Austin.
Nah, I ain't ready for that one. Again, I'm not I know what I'm talking about. Don't get me wrong. That's a whole different level of football knowledge and football, ability in terms of coaching players. I can talk it with the best of them. I still haven't been able to do what these guys do, which is get guys to go lay their body on the line for you every Saturday, right? That's a tough ask, especially when we're talking about 19 and 23-year-old kids. It's a really, really hard job.
Yeah. One other question I had, if we could go into to Justin Schaefer. Mm-hmm. How have you seen his development? To me, he's always been a guy. It seems like he's at times maybe struggled with concentration, or he's had a hiccup play, right? But
we call those taking plays off. That if there's one thing I see in two things I see in Justin's game. First of all, he started last year for Georgia because he's the most physical football player on that offensive line that you have, period, point blank. Jamari Sawyer is not a crap talker. Jamari Sawyer is not a guy you want to take into an alley with you. He's big. He's physical. Justin Schaefer will try to murder you, okay? That's that type of football player. He's DeKalb County. Like, we're talking about a Pace athlete, a Pace Academy athlete, and Jamari Sawyer, and a kid that went to Cedar Grove, okay? These are two totally different upcomings and upbringings, all right? Justin Schaefer is a dog in every sense of the word, a D-O-G dog, not a D-A-W-G. I'm talking about a dog. I'm talking about a guy that buries folks, finishes plays. Now, it also is the reason he's as inconsistent as he is, because on one play, he's 15 yards downfield, giving maximum effort, putting somebody on his head, and then the next play, he's on his face because he's leaning and he's falling over his toes. And that's why you see the catch-22. If he could find the midline of that, which I don't think it's possible because it takes away from what he is, which, again, is a physical menace. He wants to physically dominate you and embarrass you as many plays a game he can. But it also leaves him very, very vulnerable on other snaps. So if he can find some type of midline, he'd be a great football player. That will be the development. But I haven't seen a different Justin Schaefer from last year to this year. He's maybe a little bit more consistent, but he's a very flash in the pan player. You'll look up and he is killing somebody, and then you'll look up the next play and he's back on his face and his guy's making a play. So if he can find that midline, if he can find that happy medium, he's gonna be a really good football player for a really long time. But right now, he hasn't been able to find it still to this day.
Awesome. Yeah, want to go do a quick prediction real quick. I know we want to respect Brooks' time today, but 18-point spread, 18.5 is teetering. I know everybody thought that was kind of crazy. It's almost like Vegas. They build these big casinos for a reason, but I'm going to go think it's going to be close in the first half. Arkansas is going to try to punch them in the mouth and start quick, but I think Georgia has been emphasizing starting fast. I think Kirby was showing what Mike Tyson videos last year when he was a monster in his 20s, just running over everybody. But I like Georgia 31-14. I would lean towards maybe Arkansas in the points just because that's a lot, but I like 31-14. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I took Arkansas in the points as well. I didn't get it at 18.5. Wish I would have. But here's what I can do a little bit of a job explaining what I think Vegas is seeing. I think Vegas sees a football team in Arkansas that is run heavy, and they see a football team in Georgia that has led the nation in rushing for the better part of 2.5 years. Your rushing yards allowed, that is, on the defensive side of the football. I think the worst game plan you can have going into a game against Georgia is, hey, guys, we're going to run it 45 times today, and if we have success on the ground, we're going to win. If that's the rule, if that's what you're doing, you're going to lose. It's just not. It's not the vibe, right? It's not what you need to be doing. So I do think you can control the clock, or you can control Arkansas's offense, and you can make them one-dimensional. If that's the case, then yeah, I do see a 35-18, 35-17 type of football game. But if you let Treylon Burks behind you, okay, and if you don't have your eyes right and you let explosive plays happen, that's what this offense has lived off of this year in the passing game. I think KJ Jefferson completed 14 balls last week for like 240 yards. All right, so they're throwing the ball down the field, and they're doing so because they got guys running wide open, mainly Treylon Burks. I wrote it down. In the last 2 games, Treylon Burks has 294 yards, guys, on 32 yards per catch. 32 yards per catch. Yeah, so if you're letting that dude behind you, which he's really good at doing, you're going to have a long day. It's going to end up being a shootout. You're going to have to score points. But I think Georgia's going to do a good enough job. If I were Georgia, I'd back the corners off. I'd just say, look, KJ, if you're going to beat us, you're going to beat us on 8 for 8 this drive, and you're going to dink and duck us all day. He ain't going to be able to do it. I promise you. So that's not their MO, though. Their MO is bump and run. They want to walk down. They want to play pressed man. So if that's what they do, they'll be okay either way. I still think Georgia wins this game by, I'm going to say 14 points.
I'm with you on that. How about you, Sean? What you got?
Yeah, I think it's probably about a 14-point win or so. I think that I think Georgia's probably going to going to Arkansas's defense. I kind of feel like they're going to give Georgia probably more problems than maybe Vegas is giving them credit for doing, especially with some maybe the issues we have on our interior line. And like Brooks was saying, having like a non-traditional front. So, I don't expect Arkansas necessarily to explode with points, but I can see us kind of getting stifled a little bit too. I think that's just an adjustment similar to the Cincinnati game.
Yeah.
You got your score number, Sean, real quick?
I'll say like 35-21, something like that.
Okay. Good deal. And real quick I want to talk about the other marquee matchup. Got Ole Miss Lane Train number 12 heading to Alabama Crimson Tide. Looks like 14.5. What's your thoughts on that real quick, Brooks?
I took Ole Miss in that game as well. I took the points, both these underdogs. I think for a football team that showed that they were vulnerable in the run game. Now, that's not to say Alabama hasn't spent the last 2 weeks getting their brains beat in practice by Nick Saban about not having proper run fits and not having this, not having that, not being physical at the point of the attack, and all that football mumbo jumbo. So they very well could show up and dominate this football game in terms of the run game. But if you can't stop the run against Ole Miss, you gonna give up 60. So I think this is a game where I think the ESPN, prediction score right there has got it perfect. 46-35, 46-32. Alabama's going to have to score, and odds are they're probably going to be able to. Now, this is an Ole Miss team that's kind of been a little bit better defensively, but again, they ain't played nobody just yet. So, the best opponent they played so far is Louisville, and we've seen what that's kind of played out to be this year in the ACC in terms of the caliber of opponents coming out of that conference. So I do think this is a close game, okay? A close game midway through the fourth, and that typical Alabama crap that they do every single year where they play good opponents, right? Play good football teams, And then in the fourth quarter, you look up and they've outscored them by 2 touchdowns because the depth and the overall talent just is overwhelming, especially at home. So, I'm looking at a 40, 40-34, 45-35 type of football game here with Ole Miss covering that 14.5. I love it. That was my lock of the week this week on MBR. So, we're laying the wood on that one.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you give Lane Train Kiffin 2 weeks to prepare. They put 48 on them last year with the rush game. I know, and it looks like Florida was able to move it on Alabama as well. So maybe I think they're kind of missing some of those matchups at linebacker for Alabama. Even though they're supposed to be loaded linebacker, but yeah, I see something similar like that. I think Alabama gets a late touchdown, something like 42-34, 42-31. But I like Ole Miss in the points as well.
About you, Shane?
I don't know. Like, I'll tell you what, though, I'm a big fan. I don't know if Mrs. Kiffin was a big fan of this, but I was a really big fan of like Lane asking Katy Perry to come and cheer on the Ole Miss.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be. I think maybe a 14-point game is about right. I think that the difference just being athletes. I mean, Lane Kiffin will find a way to score some points, but just Alabama's going to find a way to, I think, make enough stops. And, Alabama's offense is obviously explosive. So
sorry about those dogs back there. That's Sean's dogs getting ready for the game.
I'm sorry about that.
They're getting ready for the game on Saturday.
That's right.
Great slate of games. We'll be there in person. Brooks, how do we follow you on social media and your YouTube? What's the good? I know you got over 5,000 subscribers. Make sure and like and subscribe on Brooks Austin, the film guy. Where can we follow you?
I think we're actually almost at 5,800 subscribers over on YouTube. So that joint is growing and growing fast. But now you can just probably type into Google Brooks Austin YouTube. It'll pop right up there. Honestly, I think if you just type in Brooks Austin, the first thing that pops up is my YouTube page because, Google owns YouTube. But anyways, you can follow me on Twitter at Brooks Austin SI. And if you just want to streamline the approach, that's probably the best way to be. There's not a piece of content I put out that don't end up on my Twitter feed. So, check me out over there. Appreciate you guys for having me, gentlemen.
No problem.
Absolutely. Thank you.
One quick thing, because I saw your sponsor. What's your favorite set of kicks? Because I saw your sponsor. If you had to pick, I know you had a sneakerhead.
I've really been vibing with these lately. These little old school trainer joints.
Okay.
I like these, man. As a guy who's kind of getting into my retro type of, retro's back. I don't know if you know this, so like concert tees, things like that. That's back. I rock these joints with that every time. I also love these Griffey trainers I got from Cola Kicks. These are probably my favorite I picked up from Cola. These right here. And this is the great thing about Cola Kicks. I could not find these things forever. Okay, couldn't find them. I walk into Cola Kicks location up there in Augusta. They're right on the wall. Took them right off the wall, put them on my feet, walked out the store with them. So, yeah, man, colakicks.com. Use promo code Brooks. You'll get $10 off any purchase of $100 or more.
Awesome, man. We really appreciate you coming on today. It was a pleasure.
No doubt, gentlemen. We'll see y'all soon.
Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, Brooks.